They told us that no one is above the law, but just hours ago inside the Senate chamber, 51 lawmakers proved that was never true. The cameras caught a moment that should have shaken every person watching: a man standing beneath the carved words "equal justice under law," shouting that America had failed its own promise. His voice cracked with fury as he asked the question millions have whispered for years: why are the rich and powerful still protected while the victims are forgotten? For a brief second, the chamber fell silent. Every senator knew exactly what he was talking about: the Epstein files. Hundreds of pages that could expose who bought access, who covered it up, and who's been lying to the American people for decades.
Who abused young women. So today we had a chance to vote on whether the case is closed. We had before us an amendment which said, deliver the files. Create the force of law, deliver the files. And 51 senators in this body, I am ashamed to say, said, hell no. We want them kept secret. We want to protect the perpetrators. Why? Because the man in the Oval Office, Mr. Trump, told us he wants us to protect those files, does not want them public. On July 17th, the Wall Street Journal reported on a letter allegedly written by Trump to Epstein as part of a birthday book for his 50th birthday in 2003. The letter is signed at the bottom, Donald. It features a drawing of a woman's body with very suggestive text. I debated putting that letter up. There's a chart of it in the door behind me, but it's already been made public. The public has seen it. I find it profoundly offensive letter. And as I passed by a stack of newspapers today, I saw a series of examples of Donald Trump's signature because Trump has said to the world, it's not my signature. But of course, the experts say that's not true. The birthday book contains another photo of Mr. Epstein holding an oversized novelty check from DJ Trump for $22,500. What is that check for? Underneath the photo, taken in the 1990s, a handwritten note says, quote, Jeffrey showing early talents with money and women, sells fully depreciated, and then there's a name of a woman who's been blocked out, to Donald Trump for $22,500. I don't know if a woman was sold to Donald Trump for $22,500. I don't know what it means to call a woman fully depreciated. I don't know if it was just kind of a brazen joke between a couple of very powerful men, but it's certainly not a funny joke. It certainly implies and suggests a camaraderie in the idea that young women are for sale. On July 15th, House Speaker Mike Johnson told CNN, we should put everything out there and let the people decide it. Well, actions are more powerful than words. The words were, we should put everything out there. The action was he adjourned the House of Representatives early for August recess to avoid voting on release of the files. Well, the House is back in session now. So I call on Speaker Mike Johnson to stand up for the principle carved above those pillars on the Supreme Court, equal justice under law, hold a vote in the House of Representatives on release of the files. The leader of the Senate told Fox News, I always am a believer in transparency. I think more is always better. Today we voted on transparency, and the vote from across the aisle was case closed, no transparency, no accountability. I certainly agree with the sentiment. It's time to put everything out there. The American people have been clear. They want these files released because they still treasure the idea that possibly powerful people in this chamber actually believe in the principles that we were raised on here in the United States of America of equal justice under law, that nobody is above the law. Still cherish that little seed of hope that maybe when we have a vote in this chamber, 100 senators will say, hell yes. But today, they were crushed because the majority said, hell no. Seal the file, protect the president, protect the powerful. To hell with justice for the victims, the young women who were so impacted, devastated by the activities of Jeffrey Epstein and his associates. The American people know better. They demand transparency. They demand accountability. They demand justice. The victims demand transparency. The victims demand accountability. And the victims demand justice. And we had a chance to deliver it today, and we failed them. My bill, which was introduced as the amendment by Senator Schumer, requires the Attorney General to release all materials and records related to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, including the flight and travel records, the names of individuals, the names of businesses and nonprofits and other organizations, any immunity deals, any non-prosecution agreements, any plea bargains, any settlements, internal Department of Justice communications about decisions to charge or not charge those involved, all communications about attempts to conceal information or documents, and any documentation related to Mr. Epstein's detention or death. It makes one exception, and that exception is deleting the names of the victims involved. They should only be named if they choose to come forward. Let me quote from what this bill requires. No record should be withheld, delayed, or redacted on the basis of any of the following: embarrassment, reputational harm, political sensitivity, including any government official, public figure, or foreign dignitary. But it will redact names of the victims and underage witnesses, including their personally identifiable information, depictions of their abuse, or information that jeopardize an active federal investigation or national security. This was carefully crafted with the insights of law enforcement to hold people accountable and redact only what was necessary to protect either an ongoing investigation or to protect the victims. We had a chance to do the right thing today, and 49 senators said do the right thing, and 51 said no and tabled this bill. I hope my colleagues who voted to table the bill today will search their hearts and come back and say, bring it up again, because I want to be on the right side. I want to be on the right side of the principle. I want to be on the right side of the victims. I want to deliver on that little seed of hope that somehow, when push comes to shove, some powerful men in this chamber will hold other powerful men accountable. On behalf of every citizen who shares that vision across our country, who believes in the words carved above the Supreme Court, I and others will continue to press for accountability, for transparency, for justice. May it be so that we reconsider and 100 senators team up together to say hell yes on those core principles we cherish as Americans. Thank you, Mr. President.
But instead of shining a light, the majority chose to shut the door. They called it a procedural vote, but it was much more than that. It was a test of whether justice still means anything in this country. Because make no mistake, this wasn't some forgotten case from the past. This was about a network that thrived on silence, on power, and on people like Pam Bondi, who once promised transparency and then slammed the brakes the moment those records hit her desk. The senator's voice echoed through the chamber, "Let the chips fall where they may." But outside those walls, the chips were already stacked against the truth. The story begins with a bill, one simple amendment that could have changed everything. It ordered the Department of Justice to release every document tied to the Epstein investigation, flight logs, financial transfers, deals cut in the shadows, and communications that might explain how one man managed to traffic and abuse young women while mingling with the most powerful figures on earth. All the amendment asked was sunlight. All it demanded was honesty. When the vote came, the numbers were supposed to be symbolic, except they weren't. 49 senators said yes, 51 said no, and with that, the door slammed shut again. Behind the polished speeches about national security and privacy, the message was crystal clear: protect the system, not the victims. What makes this even more infuriating is how differently things looked just a few years ago. Under a previous administration, Senate investigators had been combing through Epstein's financial web with full cooperation from the Treasury. They saw the suspicious activity reports. They tracked how millions moved quietly between offshore accounts and shell companies tied to the same elite circles now hiding behind ongoing investigations. Then the change came. A new administration stepped in, and with it came Pam Bondi, a name that survivors would come to associate not with justice but with obstruction. Bondi had a chance to make history. She could have helped deliver closure for hundreds of women whose lives were torn apart. Instead, she closed the case. Literally. 2 words: case closed. That decision didn't just stop an investigation, it stopped hope. Behind those sealed files sit names, connections, and transactions that could reveal who enabled a global trafficking ring. Some names might belong to people who were merely acquaintances, some to those who turned a blind eye, and others to men who directly took part. No one outside the walls of power knows which is which, and that's exactly how they want it. While Bondi refused to cooperate, reporters uncovered a disturbing collection of material from Epstein's inner circle. Letters, private notes, and photographs that revealed a culture of arrogance among those who once called him a friend. In one piece of correspondence, powerful men joked about women as if they were currency, proof that the cruelty wasn't just in the crimes themselves but in the way they were discussed. The Senate knew this. They knew the files contained evidence of who traveled where, who paid what, and who benefited from Epstein's network. But instead of acting, they folded. And here's where the hypocrisy hits hardest. Publicly, members of Congress talk about transparency as a pillar of democracy. They tweet slogans about accountability. They stand in front of cameras and promise voters that no one is above the law. Yet when it was time to vote, time to match words with action, many of those same voices vanished. One House leader even told reporters, "We should put everything out there and let the people decide." Sounds noble, right? But the next day he quietly adjourned the House for recess before the vote could take place. In the Senate, others gave speeches about open government and truth for the victims, then turned around and voted to bury the evidence. And in the middle of it all, Bondi stood as the wall between justice and exposure. She wasn't just a lawyer defending a client, she became the gatekeeper of secrets that stretched across governments, corporations, and celebrity circles. Her job was supposed to be protecting the law. Instead, she protected the powerful. Think about what that means for the survivors. Many of these women were teenagers when they were first groomed. They were silenced, discredited, and humiliated. Some have spent decades trying to rebuild their lives while watching the people who hurt them walk free. For them this vote wasn't about politics, it was about dignity. Every time those files stay sealed it tells them their pain still doesn't matter. The senator who introduced the bill made sure of one thing: the proposal redacted victims' names and identities. It protected their privacy completely. The only people exposed would have been adults who participated, enabled or profited. That's what made the privacy argument ring hollow. The only privacy being protected here was the privacy of perpetrators. And that's where the phrase equal justice under law starts to feel like a cruel joke. Because when a government hides evidence to protect reputations, that's not justice, that's complicity. It's not the first time secrecy has been weaponized like this. History is full of examples where documents were locked away in the name of national interest, only to later reveal cover-ups and corruption. Each time it happens, trust dies a little more. Each time the message to ordinary people becomes clearer: laws apply to you, not to them. Behind the scenes, staffers whispered about the pressure campaign that swept through the Capitol before the vote. Lobbyists and legal advisors warned senators that releasing the files could destabilize institutions. Some were told it would embarrass influential figures and cause diplomatic fallout. But since when is embarrassment a reason to block justice? Since when does the comfort of the powerful outweigh the suffering of victims? Even within law enforcement there's frustration. Investigators who worked the original case know what's inside those files. They've seen the names, the travel manifests, the bank transfers. Some of them have quietly said the evidence could connect dots the public never imagined. Yet their hands are tied because those in charge refuse to unseal the truth. That refusal has consequences far beyond one scandal. Every cover-up teaches future predators that power still protects them. Every delay signals to victims that their abusers will outlive accountability. And every act of silence chips away at the idea that justice is blind. But there's another side to this story, the one the establishment doesn't expect. It's the growing movement of citizens, journalists and survivors who are refusing to stay quiet. They're the ones filing freedom of information requests, pushing lawsuits, tracking financial records, and exposing inconsistencies one by one. They're the reason we even know this vote happened. Transparency advocates point out that releasing the files doesn't mean declaring guilt. It simply means allowing evidence to be examined. A name in a ledger or a flight log doesn't prove a crime, it proves a connection. Connections deserve scrutiny, not secrecy. Think of what could be uncovered if those documents were opened. Who flew with whom? Who funded which trips? Who authorized suspicious payments through intermediaries? These are the questions sunlight could answer. Without transparency, those patterns remain hidden, and speculation fills the void. And speculation, ironically, is what the government claims it wants to avoid. They say they fear misinformation, but hiding information only breeds more of it. When people are left in the dark, rumors become the only light they have. The senator who introduced the amendment understood this. That's why his proposal was crafted with precision: redact victims, protect ongoing cases, and release the rest. No more, no less. Nothing reckless, just the truth, responsibly revealed. But that balance was rejected in favor of a blanket seal. Imagine being one of those survivors watching the news that night. You see politicians argue for hours about protecting reputations while no one mentions your name, your pain, or your future. For many that's not politics, it's another form of trauma. And the cost doesn't stop there. Public faith in justice systems depends on transparency. When people believe the courts and Congress exist only to protect elites, the very foundation of democracy weakens. If citizens think accountability is reserved for the powerless, they stop believing in the rule of law altogether. That's the deeper danger of what happened on the Senate floor. It wasn't just one bad vote, it was another fracture in the idea that truth matters. Still, the story isn't over. Some lawmakers who voted no are already facing backlash from constituents demanding explanations. Advocacy groups are preparing petitions to reintroduce the amendment. Journalists are combing through financial disclosures and flight records from other sources, determined to fill the gap the government created. Every movement toward truth begins with pressure, and that pressure comes from people watching videos like this one, people who refuse to accept case closed as the final word. If you're still here watching, it means you care about accountability. So here's what you can do right now. Call your representatives, send an email, Tell them you support releasing the Epstein-related records with redactions only for victims and active investigations. Demand that transparency be the rule, not the exception. If you don't know what to say, start with this: I'm a constituent, and I believe the public has a right to know the full truth about how this case was handled. Justice means sunlight, not secrecy. Support survivor organizations that offer legal help and counseling to those affected by trafficking and exploitation. Share verified reporting from independent journalists who are following the money trail. The more light we shine collectively, the less room there is for darkness to hide. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about one scandal, it's about the kind of country we want to live in. Do we accept a system where power protects itself, or do we demand one where truth protects everyone? The senator who stood on that floor wasn't just speaking for victims, he was speaking for anyone who still believes those 4 words carved in stone mean something real: equal justice under law. If those words still matter to you, then don't look away, don't let silence win again. Share this video so others can see what really happened behind the Senate doors. Leave a comment with your thoughts on how transparency can be restored. And if you believe that sunlight is the best disinfectant, hit subscribe, because this isn't the last cover-up we're going to expose. Justice delayed is justice denied, but together we can make sure it isn't denied forever.